Hello dear students, we have finished life processes chapter so far. Chapter was quite big, but we have touched all the topics in detail, and during that chapter we have seen that movement is one of the very important and vital life process. These life processes are very important as far as maintenance function of living organisms are concerned. There we have started with a notion we all have that if we see something moving, it is alive. Some of these movements are in fact the result of growth, as in plant. A seed germinates and grows, and we can see that the seedlings move over the course of a few days. It pushes soil aside and comes out. But if its growth were to be stopped, these movements would not happen. Some movements, as in many animals and some plants, are not connected with growth. A cat running, a children playing in the garden, on the street, buffaloes chew cud, snake is running behind a rat, a student is going to school. These all are also a movements, but these all movements are not connected with growth. So growth and movement are these two aspects. Obviously both of these will come under the movement category. So question arises that what do we associate such visible movements with life? And probably the answer will be we think of movement as a response to a change in the environment of the organism. Whenever environment of organism changes, accordingly growth takes place. For example, plants flowers during particular season. It is a response of environment for flowering of plants. Likely, the cat may be running because it has seen a mouse. Not only that, we also think of movement as attempt by living organisms to use changes in their environment to their advantage. Plants movement is in response to sunshine or sunlight. We have seen experiment if a potted plant kept in a window, what happens? It starts growing towards sunlight. Children try to get pleasure and fun out of singing. So this is also a movement. Buffaloes chew cud to help break up tough food so far and will be able to digest it better. When bright light is focused on our eyes, what happens? We close our eyes. And secondly, if we touch a hot object, what happens? We remove our hand very quickly. It means we detect changes and respond to these changes accordingly. But in our body, what exactly is the mechanism to control these all things? to understand the danger, to understand how to respond to the environment according to situation. So that mechanism comes under control and coordination of our body, because we are standing, we are running, we are frightened, we are joyous. All these are the responses to the environment, and these responses are changing time to time. For example, when we are on ground, at that time if we are talking with our friend, that time we talk very loudly, or when we are playing on the ground, that time we shout to call our friend. But at the same time, when you are sitting in the class and if you want to talk with your friend, what happens? You whisper. So these responses also changes, the action is same, but these responses also changes according to environmental conditions. Appropriate movement in response takes place. So how our body understand that how to respond in this environment, or what environment is exactly. So the movement to be made depends on the event that is triggering it. Therefore, such controlled movement must be connected to the recognition of various events in the environment, followed by only the correct movement in the response. So living organisms must use system providing control and coordination in keeping with the general principle of body organization in multicellular organisms. So all these issues are related with the multicellular organisms, because for unicellular organisms only one cell, so accordingly there is no need of any particular system. Cell wall or cell membrane itself can take decisions. But as far as multicellular organisms are concerned, this decision making system must be present in the body, and this system is called as a control and coordination system. Specialized tissues are used to provide these control and coordination activities in animals. So which are these tissues? Let us see in next slide the nervous system or nervous tissue. In animals, these control and coordination activities are provided by a nervous and muscular tissues. In standard 9, we have seen the structure of neuron. In the structure of neuron, that time we have seen about this neuron consists of a cell body called as a cyton and a number of branches, nerve fibers arising from the cyton. Neuron does not divide. Cyton contain a nucleus within the cytoplasm, that is Nissel's granules formed of rough endoplasmic reticulum with ribosomes and fine thread-like fibers called neurofibrils. The parts of dendrites are the parts of neuron are dendrites, axons, these two parts. As far as dendrites are concerned, these are short, several, much branched and contains granules. They carry impulse towards the cyton. So these are the sensory points which detect environmental changes like touch, like heat, like water, like cold. These all are sensed by these dendrites in the form of different types of impulses, and these impulses are sent to the cyton. Mostly these impulses are in the form of chemical impulses. Next part is axon. It is large, single and unbranched structure. It has not Nissus granules. It carries impulses from cyton to the effector organ like glands, muscles, etc. It is typical nerve fiber consisting of central thin cytoplasm, cylindrical axis continuous with the body. Its cytoplasm is called as a exoplasm. Axis cylinder is enclosed in a thin permeable membrane called exolemma or nerve membrane. A layer of fatty material called myelin or medullary sheath is found outside the exolemma. Such fibers are called myelinated or medullated fibers. They seem to be white. Nerve fibers lacking myelin sheath are called non-myelated sheets and appear grey in color. So you can see there are two types of nerve tissues, myelated, that is medullated, and non-myelinated or medullated. Myelin is interrupted at intervals by circular constrictions they are called as nodes of Ranvier. Terminal branches of axon are called telodendria. Each telodendron ends with a swollen knob called as synaptic knob or terminal button. Synaptic knob of one nerve fiber, that is axon, forms synapse with the dendrites to another neuron. Synapse is very fine gap between two neurons. Thus, in the entire nervous system, neurons are linked together. So here we see that our body is a net or network of neurons. How in LAN connection computers are connected to each other, likely are all organs are connected to each other with the help of neuron. Touching a hot object is an urgent and dangerous situation for us. So we detect it as far as this danger is concerned and respond it very quickly. Now question arises that how do we detect that we are touching a hot object? Let us see in next slide. So here we go. All information from our environment is detected by the specialized tips of some nerve cells. These receptors are usually located in our sense organs such as the inner ear, the nose, the tongue and so on. So gustatory receptors will detect the taste. So obviously these gustatory receptors are present in our tongue, while olfactory receptors will detect a smell. These olfactory receptors are present in the nose. Now this information which is collected by these organs, different types of organs, sense organs we can call, is acquired at the end of the dendrite tip of a nerve cells. Set off a chemical reaction that creates an electric impulse. This impulse travels from the dendrite to the cell body and then along the axon to its end. At the end of the axon, the electric impulse set off the release of some chemicals. These chemicals cross the gap which is called as a synaptical gap. Later we have seen just now in the structure of neuron, and start a similar electric impulse in a dendrite of the next neuron. This is a general scheme of how nerve impulses travel in the body. A similar synapse finally allows delivery of such impulse from neuron to other cells such as muscle cells or glands. So as I told you, there is a LAN, local area network, in our body, which is connecting all the body parts with each other and finally with the brain. It is thus no surprise that nervous tissues is made up of an organized network of nerve cells or neurons and is specialized for conducting information via electrical impulses from one part of the body to another. If we see at figure and identify the parts of neuron where information is acquired, through which information travel as an electrical impulse, and where this impulse must be converted into chemical signals for onward transmission. But question arises that is there a difference in how sugar and food taste if your nose is blocked? So when we are testing a sugar, it is but obvious it is tested with the help of our tongue. But if we close our nose and then taste the sugar, there is a little change in the taste. Why? Because all the organs are connected with each other, all the sensory organs are connected with each other, and that's reason there is a change in the reception of the signals. So when we are feeling cold, that time how these sensory organs are working, that we have to see in the next part, that what happen exactly in reflex action, or when immediate situations are there, what exactly is the condition to respond and how we respond. Let us see in next slide. So here we have to see that what happens in reflex action. Now what is by reflex? It is a word used very commonly when we talk about some sudden action in response to something in the environment. We say, I jumped out of the way of the bus reflexly, or I pulled my hand back from the flame reflexly, or I was so hungry my mouth started watering reflexly. What exactly do we mean? A common idea in all such examples is that we do something without thinking about it or without feeling in control of our reflection or reaction. Yet, these are situations where we are responding with some actions to changes in our environment. How is control and coordination achieved such situation? Let us see. Take one of our example. Touching a flame is an urgent and dangerous situation for us, or in fact for any animal. How do we respond to this? One seemingly simple way is to think consciously about the pain and the possibility of getting burned, and therefore move our hand. An important question then is, how long will we take to think about this? The answer depends on how we think. If nerve impulses are recent around the way we have talked about earlier in the section of neuron, then thinking is also likely to involve the creation of such impulses. Thinking is a complex activity, so it is bound to involve a complicated interaction of many nerve impulses from many neurons. In this case, it is no surprise that the thinking tissues in our body consist of dense network of intricately arranged neurons. It sits in the forward end of the skull and receives signal from all over the body, which is which it thinks about before responding to them. Obviously, in order to receive these signals, and then thinking part of the brain in the skull must be connected to nerve coming from various parts of the body. Similarly, in this part of the brain to is to be instruct muscles to move. Nerve must carry this signal that we have to move the muscles and we have to take away the hand from the hot object. It will take time. It may take enough time for us to get burned. Then how does the design of the body solve this problem? Rather than having to think about the sensation of heat, if the nerve that detect heat were to be connected to the nerves that moves muscles in simpler way, the process of detecting the signals or the input and responding to it by an output action might be completed quickly. Such connection is commonly called as a reflex arc. So, reflex arc is a pathway of reflex action where the detection of sense is done with the help of receptors. The processing is done at spinal cord level itself, and then effector neuron will have the action. Where should such reflex arc connections be made between the input nerve and the output nerve? The last place of course would be at the point where they first meet each other. So nerves from all over the body meet in a bundle in the spinal cord on their way to the brain. Reflex arcs are formed in the signal cord itself. Although the information input also goes on to reach the brain. Of course, reflex arcs have evolved in animals because the thinking process of the brain is not fast enough. In fact, many animals have very little or none of the complex neurons network needed for thinking. So it is quite likely that reflex arcs have evolved as an efficient way of functioning in the absence of true thought processes. However, even after complex neuron network have come into existence, reflex arcs continue to be more efficient for quick responses. In short, reflex arcs are first introduced in animals for taking quick actions. Afterwards, thinking process has developed, but reflex arc during the course of evolution also remain same. If we see figure here, what the figure tells us? Figure tells us that there are sensory neurons which carry information impulses from hot objects to the towards it is going towards brain. Here it meets at spinal cord, which is present in our backbone. The processing of information takes place here. A relay neuron decides something based on previous examples, past experiences, and give information to motor neuron, send information to motor neuron. So here is a effector, that is muscles in the arms as shown in the figure, but at the same time one segment of information is sent to the brain, message sent to the brain, such and such conditions has taken place and we have taken such and such action. Such message is sent to the brain for further development. So as far as reflex action is concerned, reflex action is the name given to the response which is at the level of spinal cord itself. It is a rapid automatic response to a stimulus by an organ or a system of organs. which does not involve the brain for its initiation. A reflex action is an unconscious, that is without will, and involuntary response of effectors, muscles or glands to a stimulus. So reflex action you can consider by uh, two ways. For example, at a sudden if we see snake, what happens? We start running. So that is also reflex action. But in this reflex action, many organs are involved, isn't it? So reflexes are of two types: simple or unconditioned and continued reflexes. So what is by simple reflexes? It is an inborn response to a stimulus where learning is not required. They are mostly protective in function. For example, knee jerk occur immediately when patella tendon or of leg is sharply tapped. Quick closing of eyelids when an object suddenly comes in front of eyes, that is a closing of eyes is a reflex action. Now there are conditioned reflexes. These are not inborn. This is second type, conditioned reflexes. They are not inborn. They are acquired by experience, training and learning. For example, learning of cycling or driving of a scooter are conditioned reflexes. Automatically afterwards things happens, isn't it? So these are of two types. Here one part is that electroencephalogram, that is ECG. This is an instrument called electroencephalogram. ECG can record electric activity of our brains. The activity of brain is recorded as electric potential. Such a record is called as a ECG. By placing two electrodes on the scalp and leading via suitable amplifier to ink writing device, record of four different types of waves is obtained. These waves are named as alpha, beta, delta and theta and vary in frequency. These waves gives the characteristic activity of brain, which is very useful for clinical purposes. So this was all about reflex action and reflex arc. In next part we have to see how our brain is developed to for the thinking process, and the how this brain, very important organ, is protected in our body.